So, good morning, everybody. I'm Philippa Haynes.
And I'm Mark Lee. Welcome to the Accountant Success Secrets podcast.
So, we normally showcase and celebrate successful accountants who are doing great things, have years of experience, and whose stories can inspire and encourage other accountants around the UK.
Yeah, we talk to accountants who've been at the top of their game for several years and have some key foundational learnings to share, including highs, lows, valuable stories that provide fundamental insights for you, the listener. At the end of the day, we want you to see the person behind the accountant with airtime and a platform to share their story.
Today, though, our planned guest has had to drop out. They are poorly sick. So we decided to go ahead without a guest, but we have loads of insights to share with you.
Absolutely. And we wish our guest better, obviously, and hope to have them back on a future occasion. And Philippa and I had a brief discussion and agreed that rather than cancel the edition, we'd implement our backup plan.
Yes, it's a good job we had one. And Mark, you created that, so nothing to do with me. So well done.
Yes, and it's backup plan we can use again in the future. So what we're going to do is we're each going to share a story or two about accountants that we've worked with and whose experiences we hope will inspire and motivate you, as we hope that our guests normally do.
Yeah. So Mark, you're going to tell us about a sole practitioner, aren't you, with a very modern specialisation and who has increased his fees at least 4 times over the last 2 years, which seems totally amazing.
It is astonishing. And do you have a client in mind that you're going to talk about, Philippa, or are you going to be inspired by my conversation?
I've got a few. I'm going to be guided by the client that you talk about, because I think I've got some insights that I can overlay on top of that, but I'll also use some of my own kind of client stories to kind of illustrate as well. So, yeah.
Well, that is great. And if there's time, I suspect it'll come out in the conversation. We'll build on those stories and get each other's take on our areas of expertise, and in particular, from your perspective, when it does and when it doesn't make sense to consider rebranding an accountancy practice.
Yeah, totally.
And we're going to do all that within our normal 30-minute recording slot.
Yeah, definitely. So we better get on, haven't we? Because we've only got 30 minutes. So let's get cracking. Over to you, Mark. Tell us a little bit about your first client.
Okay, so the guy I had in mind, when he first approached me, he'd started his own practice, I think about 3 years previously, and he was very, very stressed. And the reason he was stressed was because he had too many clients, and this won't come as a surprise to many accountants listening to this, too many clients who weren't paying him adequate fees. And the reason for that was the pretty age-old issue that when he started his practice, he took on anybody and everybody at whatever fees he could get. But his situation was very different to most of the accountants that I work with. He'd been working in a larger practice and had started working on clients that had a particular business focus that the firm he worked with didn't see as an area they wanted to specialize in. And after a while, he came to an agreement with the firm that he could leave and take 8 or 10 clients with him. And when he started his own practice, he asked those clients to tell their friends, and he also contacted people through relevant Facebook groups who had the same business area of expertise as the clients he was working with. And he thought, well, he'd better charge more than the old firm had. So the old firm was charging £300 or £400 a year for these clients' tax returns. They tended to be employees that had other interests and income that needed to be disclosed on their tax returns. We don't need to go into the precise details. I stopped giving tax advice talking about tax a long time ago. And so he started charging, I think, £500 or £600 a year for these clients' tax returns. But he found that he was spending longer and longer on them, because as they became more experienced doing what they were doing, the information that needed to be collated and disclosed on tax returns became more and more complex and more time consuming for him to work through. So he put his fees up from £500 or £600. I think he started quoting 900, 1,000, 1,100. In year 2, he was typically charging close to 2,000. And then by year 3, when he came to me, his new clients were typically paying over £3,000 a year.
Wow, that is a fairly massive increase. Did that have an overall impact on time that he could spend with the client, or is this how he grew his practice? So he took on new people to serve as well?
This was one of the early conversations I had with him, because he hadn't taken on anybody. He had an associate who was helping him do some of the admin side of stuff, but he hadn't really sat down and thought about how to automate that or simplify that. He just had standard emails that he was sending out. And when we started working together, we talked about automating things and also being clearer up front to ensure that he was only taking on clients that not only were going to pay him, but I think he felt a lot better when he started quoting fees and getting at least partial payment up front, so that although he claimed he'd never suffered any bad debts, there was one that always stood out in his mind. And I pointed out that why risk that ever happening again? So he did start taking fees up front to ensure that by the time the work was done, he'd been paid in full, rather than risking bad debts or having to spend time and effort chasing debts they didn't have the time to do. When you and I started planning this, I mentioned that when I thought about this client, I realized that I had another mentoring client in a completely different field, a lady who'd actually done something very similar. Her story was very similar. She was working in a firm that specialized in a particular sector, and she was focused on particular type of clients in that sector, and thought that there might be scope to run her own practice looking after those clients. Again, her old firm were not happy to see her go, but were willing to let the clients that they didn't feel they could make a profit on go with her. Whereas working as a sole practitioner, she was able to make a profit. Within a couple of months of starting to work with me, she's taken on her first employee, and she hasn't put her fees up quite as dramatically as the first guy I'm thinking of, but her fees are higher. She's feeling a lot less stressful, and it's very sweet. And you probably have this as well, Philippa. I love it when clients tell me that they just feel better having talked to me, even if all I've done is sort of confirmed their thought process.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, this horrible, dirty word that we hear all the time, which is niche. I mean, I think we can call it specialism if we want to. That's probably a nicer word. But actually, it can bring greater value, as you've said, because if you do have a certain understanding of an industry, and if that is quite complicated, or actually it's very valuable to have an accountant who does understand that and can overlay their own experience onto it, I think that makes a dramatic difference. And that is value add, isn't it? It seems to me that there is a true benefit. And that's one of the things I would kind of want to talk about with niche, and obviously you can finish the story of yours, but sometimes people talk about niching or specialisms without actually having any interest in it, or any
Yeah.
experience in it, or anything that they can bring. And I had a conversation with a client the other day where they were actually thinking about 5 different ideal clients, and they came from, all over the place. Some were sort of, pretty sensible as a sector or mindset or whatever, but some were just like off the wall, and they couldn't really decide where they wanted to go to. And I'm not surprised, because if your thinking is that disparate, there has to be no reason for that niche or that specialism. It's purely kind of some kind of fairy tale, isn't it, that they've sort of dreamed up. And I think you've got to, if you do want to have a specialism like the 2 clients that you spoke about, you've got to know your stuff, and you've also got to be prepared to talk to them directly and say, these are the types of clients that I'm going to be serving. And that has to, with your brand, that has to show. It has to show on your website, and it has to show on everything that you do. So, you can't just talk about more generic stuff. You have to be a lot more focused on that particular specialism.
Very, very, very much so. Your reference to a client who thought he wanted 5 specialisms brings to mind a question I saw in a Facebook group for accountants the other day, where somebody said, well, I've tried specializing in this and I couldn't get any clients, so now I'm thinking specializing in that. What do you guys think? And I think my answer, or my response, was that he was possibly going about this the wrong way. I suspect you'd echo this, Philippa. Yeah, I learned years ago, when I first started talking to accountants about anything other than tax, the dirty word 20 years ago was marketing. You didn't talk about marketing. You talked about business development, because everybody was willing to talk about business development, didn't want to hear about marketing. These days, most accountants understand that they have to market themselves effectively, either through what they do, through what they say, how they present themselves, and so on. But a lot of them are scared of the idea of niching, and that's absolutely fine, because you don't have to niche in order to be successful. And many of the accountants that we've spoken to and that we will talk to do not have an identifiable niche as such.
Yeah.
But
go on, sorry.
No, you go on.
No, it's interesting. I've just had a comment from Penelope Allard. She's online watching a little bit of this live, and of course, whilst she doesn't niche specifically to one sector, I mean, what's very, very clear, and as her business continues, she's becoming more kind of sustainability, talking about water and water sort of, sustainable in that sense. And she's now starting to talk to her local water providers and being involved in some sort of a kind of 6 monthly meeting where they talk about, the system and what's going on and some of the issues. Now, that is a specialism in its sense. Yes, she's been swimming since she was tiny, and her brand is all about that. But actually, it's a passion that is developing as the narrative develops over time. And we all know what's been going on with sewage and, all of these kind of water companies and all of that. But she's actually putting her specialism or her interest into something which can bring additional insight, additional value to her clients. And she will be continuing to attract people who are very interested in that sort of area. So it's interesting.
It is, and it shows the value of being genuine and authentic. Her brand, which I suspect we'll talk about in a minute, which I know she worked on with you, has led to her winning ICB Award, Institute of Certified Bookkeepers Award last year, New Firm of the Year, I think, or something like that. This year, Large Firm of the Year at the ICB Awards. And it's hard to imagine that she would have received that level of attention and accolade were it not for some clarity around her branding and her message, all tied in with what is authentically her. And that's the point that I think I was leading towards when I talked about this Facebook question. If you try to have a pretend focus that doesn't reflect who you are and what you're really interested in, it shows, and you struggle to really be of value to those clients. And this point about niching being scary, yes, if you don't have a particular sector you're interested in, and Penny might not have done when she started the whole branding and niching exercise, what she was able to do, and what it's brilliant the way I've seen you do this with other accountants, bookkeepers as well, is helping people to evidence what is authentically them, to attract and appeal to the people that they want to work with. And yeah, when I don't talk about niching, as it were, I talk about having clarity of a marketing focus. So focusing your marketing on a particular type of person or people.
Yeah.
That may or may not be people in a single sector. It may or may not be people at the single demographic. But it makes it much easier for your marketing to have the impact you want it to have, to influence the people who you want to work with, or the type of people that you want to work with.
Exactly. Penny's just saying here that her niche is developed, and actually that's okay. It does develop over time and becomes more sophisticated. Obviously, you need a bit of time to know what that niche is, and you've got to think about it quite seriously. So that's her story. But I think being authentic, as you said, is really at the heart of everything, really. You're going to be found out pretty soon if you're not being genuine. And I think what you were talking about there, Mark, also is about marketing to a mindset or a particular type of person, a type of personality, which is sometimes what I advise my clients to do, because they don't want to be sector specific, but there are particular clients that they work really well with, who bring value, and it's a very good reciprocal relationship. And a lot of the time it's about their perspective on business or their perspective on life. So I mean, I have a client at the moment who's really just launching, and he's one of those types of people who, he's a big, larger than life person who is, he's got to be the best at everything he does, and really kind of not aggressive, because he's a lovely guy, but he just wants to win big. And so we've developed his kind of specialism, really, to talk to people who are equally as bullish, so it's not for the faint-hearted. That client, he's not going to be attracting people who are really, frightened of finances. He's going to attract those people who have big dreams and who want to go much further. So that's another way of approaching it as well.
It is, and that's also, I'd say that's a huge testament to you as well, that somebody like that recognizes the skills and talents that you can bring to help him, despite you not being, in my knowledge of you, not being of that mindset and approach yourself.
Yeah, a wolf in sheep's clothing there. No, but you're right. But I think, I mean,
but you did work in large corporates, so I'm sure you've had the experience of dealing with many personalities like that over the years, which meant that you were able to relate to him and he could relate to you, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think it's probably the same for you as well with your Soul Practice Club. There are people there who you just gel with, and you're able to give that higher level support to. just because you're not close to it, but you understand the person, and so it's valuable, I think. Good. Any other clients who are very good with specialisms?
Well, another one who comes to mind is not a client anymore. He I'm thinking about how much to say in case he listens to this and recognizes himself. If he does, I hope he takes in the positive spirit it's intended. So he, long before I started the Soul Practice Club, which is an online sort of mastermind group for sole practitioner accountants, pre-pandemic, I had pretty much the same concept sitting around a board table in London. It had the huge disadvantage that you could only become a member of the inner circle if you could get into London. So we never grew as big as the Soul Practice Club is. But there was one guy who came along for years, loved it. And the two or three things always stood out. Whenever he came, he never drank the tea and coffee on offer. He always brought his own smoothie, green, big, very, very large smoothie. It would take him a whole morning to get through. And he cycled there from his base. Lovely fella, always contributed, always very positive about it all. And he had his website done to clearly focus on his interest in fitness, being green, eating well, and all the rest of it. He wasn't focused on clients like that as such, but a bit, as you mentioned with your client Penny, he attracted people who liked that style and approach in their accountant. Who knew you could find an accountant who knew what they were doing, but also had similar interests to you in being healthy, looking after yourself, looking after the environment, and all the rest of it. It was absolutely genuine with him and with his family. And I'm absolutely convinced it's one of the reasons why he always had so many clients and retained them as well.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm sure anybody who's listening to this will think, oh, well, that's all right for a solo business owner because they can sort of show their personality and their interests, etc. But I mean, I do have larger clients who, in particular, one of them is very purpose driven. But when they came to me, was kind of struggling to connect with the rest of the team. So it was a new kind of position and new situation. And I think there was this massive disconnect of, this person had come in with kind of thinking in a certain way, but either had been unable or hadn't had the time to talk to the team and find that kind of connection with them. So there were two sets of people kind of going forward, kind of in parallel rather than together. And actually, when I was doing the work with that particular team, I spoke to each person individually, and I found out quite quickly that, in fact, each person, certainly as a result of COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown, they'd had a chance to reassess their lives. And actually, there was a lot of sort of thinking around what's my purpose, where am I going, all of those good things. And so actually what we were able to do is pull everybody together and say, there is a theme here. It doesn't matter how that translates into their behaviors. There are people within the team who are all kind of thinking along the same lines. So we managed to pull together this one sort of lone purpose-driven message into something that made sense for the whole team. And as a result, they went B Corp and then started saying, actually, our dream is to attract people and clients who feel the same as us. And of course, that wasn't necessarily where they'd started, because it was just like, this is what's interesting to us, or to me, this person. But once we'd gone through the process, it was like, actually, this is going to be so much more valuable to us. And we'll make the working day a lot better, just because we'll be talking the same language with somebody else. So it can be done in larger organizations as well.
I love that example. I think I know who you're talking about.
You do, yeah.
And it's something that I knew they needed when I think I introduced them to, or introduced you to you or whatever. And they've gone from strength to strength as well. And that idea of a founder or an owner wanting to engage the rest of the team so that they're all pulling in the same direction is crucial. It's one of the reasons we see a lot of firms trying to do it. They create agreed values and principles, but so often I hear that they've been imposed or they've been agreed through compromise, and that they end up being statements on the website for the sake of it, and they don't really mean anything. Have you seen much of that?
A lot. I mean, I've experienced that a lot myself when I was in the corporate world. It was just like somebody just drop a very nice, glossy designed document on my desk, and you could see everybody sort of glazing over and putting it to one side. And obviously there are larger firms who've done the process and who haven't really achieved buy-in. But I think that's changing, and the more future-facing firms are changing how that works. I mean, Penny's just said that she's still on, that her team love the brand and the ethos. And I was only talking the other week when I got together with Caroline Hobden and the Accountex team of, what were they thinking about and where could Accountex go in the future? And it was all about how can we embrace their team and how can we bring them along on their journey. So I think that desire to bring everybody on board and go in the same direction, whether it's a specialism or a mindset or, type of clients, that's happening, and more so.
Yeah, it's, I think you need to be enlightened to a degree to realize that these values, principles, clarity of focus, bringing the team with you, they're not nice to haves. They're not optional if you want to attract the type of clients that will pay you the fees you want for doing the work you enjoy and are the sort of people that you want to be working with. It's all part and parcel of that whole. And your expertise is invaluable here in terms of helping firms recognize how their brand needs to reflect that. Have I got that right?
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think, you obviously talk to your clients about marketing and other issues as well. And I think, it's really important that marketing isn't an afterthought and that it's embraced by everybody. So I've had another conversation recently with a client who rebranded 2 or 3 years ago. But when you start to talk to the team, A, they weren't there at the time.
Yeah.
B, they don't really know what it's about. And C, they haven't even got access to the documentation. So there's a real disconnect there between kind of living the dream and having it on a piece of paper that nobody really knows about. It's absolutely key to have your team all knowledgeable and singing from the same hymn sheet, essentially.
Yeah. It doesn't happen. It doesn't seem to happen often enough, and a bit like we spoke about right at the very beginning. If the firm is so busy with enough of the right clients coming in, maybe there's no urgency to do it, but in the longer term, it can pay dividends.
I think, sorry, I think a lot of firms are actually just long suffering though. When I talk to some, they're kind of going, oh, we have some awful clients, and they talk to us, they really talk down to us and make me feel X, Y, Z. And from my perspective, that is just not acceptable. No. So, people want to talk to me about ROI for brand and marketing, etc. And of course, that's much more difficult, but it's a long-term exercise that means that you are starting to draw in people who will spend more money and get to that £3,000 a year that you were talking about, and who are just better relationships to have.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably pretty much the way we both work with our clients as well, not always charging £4,000 a client.
No.
I have noticed that the time has run away with us today. I think we went quite well without a guest. Let's hope we don't have another one drop out next time. But before we go, Philippa, how can listeners find out more about you and Insight 101?
Well, I have a brand new website, insight101.co.uk, and it has some lovely autumn leaves on today for the autumn statement. But you can also find me on LinkedIn, where you'll see us here today, and that's probably best. So give us details about you, Mark. Where can we find you?
Well, I'm all over the web as Bookmark Lee, because as I show every time, my business card is in the shape of a bookmark as well, because my name Mark Lee is so common. So, but my website is bookmarklee.co.uk, LinkedIn, Bookmark Lee, and so on. And also on my website, there's links to find out about my mentoring packages and the Soul Practice Club, which meets online on the morning of the second Tuesday of every month.
Yeah, great stuff. So we are going to be back to the normal format next time. Hopefully no illness. I think, as we said for the last podcast, we're always looking for those people who would be keen to share their story and who feel that actually they've got something to bring. So please get in touch with us if that could be you. I mean, we had a wonderful conversation, didn't we, recently, as a result of that. So more to come, please.
Yeah, that's it. So if you've enjoyed the Accountant Success Secrets podcast, please share the love online. Let us have your feedback, and we hope to see you next time.
Great stuff. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Philippa. Bye.
Bye.